Okay, so I guess everyone is tired, and I won't take much of our time. I just wanted to make a few remarks on some of the ideas that were discussed here in the last couple of days, and try and it's not in a ways of summary. It's in a way of inviting a continuing conversation also after we depart this room and go into the writing of the articles. So a few things. We had this idea of sovereignty as trusteeship for humanity as the basis of our discussion, but actually the discussion was somewhat divided between those who were concentrating their intellectual efforts on the concept of sovereignty and the history of sovereignty, and others who were more focused on trusteeship. So actually the combination of the two wasn't always at the center, but in most cases we actually had them discussed separately. And so that was kind of one thing that I wanted to flag out. Another was that at first, at least when we thought about those 2 days, when we talked about it in recess, etc., it seemed that there was a shared intuition among many around the room that there's something about this concept that we may embrace, or that it's not. It could have a promising potential. But we would like, I guess, to question that, whether it's really the case. Was there some kind of a selection bias in the people we invited in some ways? And I think actually the latter part of today, both Andrew's paper and Sandy's comments kind of brought into the table actually a more forceful objections and concerns. So perhaps it's not as shared as it seemed at first. Okay, so I want to kind of flag out, I think, four ideas or kind of meta questions that were raised. So one is the tension between ideas and practice. So that was really a very strong element in our discussion today and yesterday, and it was brought about in several of your papers. So in Daniel's first presentation and the discussion on usus fructus, we had this tension between an intellectual engagement with the possibilities of that concept vis-a-vis Ido Israelovich, the classicist, who came and said, well, in Roman law, actually, things were slightly different, and that's that's how this idea was used. So, in some way, ideas in isolation, and in Ido's way of presenting them, the Roman law in practice, and how he understood the concept. That was one way in which this tension was brought about, and another was in Benjamin's discussion, and again, Grosch's idea vis-a-vis the digest, and how these ideas actually were practiced on the ground, and how these or thought of in the digest, and then reinterpreted by Grosch. So it's another way of thinking about the, and I think it was an insightful discussion between the classicists and ourselves to see these tensions and the way they come about. And I think that also the debate between Professor Li Ming and Yuri Pinus about Professor Ming describing the principles of sovereignty in the Chinese understanding of the concept, and Yuri Pinus trying to tell us, well, actually these ideas have a very long history and were quite constant and resistant to change, even though practice and reality was changing and the status of China was changing across time. So there were various other ways in which this tension came about, but it was really striking, I think, in the first day, and it rose, and from this, I guess, tension, two two questions kind of emerged. One was Zukas, that is, he's not here, so, but I'll present it anyway. One meta question that he kind of raised, well, maybe we can do away with ideas in some ways, or from some kind of a normative constraint, and he it kind of backlashed that idea. Can you actually do that? How would that be done? And so, but he was trying to convey Spinoza's naturalistic ideas in that particular way. Another way in which this tension was playing out is in Andrews' I guess, very provocative paper where he tells us actually there's this huge baggage that the idea the way this idea was operationalized in practice, and that has to make us wonder whether we actually can do away with that baggage. Would it ever go away? How would we go about doing that? Or perhaps that particular engagement has a liberating force in and of itself. By actually engaging in that kind of critique, are we not able to shift away? So I guess that was a very interesting intervention in that discussion, and it leads to another set of tensions that we're looking at from normativity vis-a-vis history. So it's similar, but it's not the same. So here I see David in some ways. So centering more on ideas and their normative. And here I see in some ways Andrew trying to tell a history that is in some way shies away, and Amira shying away from a normative baggage, and I think we deliberated over the past, at least especially today, how actually can we reconcile between the two, and I found in some ways Andrew's answer the most compelling, but that's actually my own argument. Maybe others have the idea of thinking about the contingency of the idea itself, and looking at normativity within the historical context, and then being able. And in some ways, I read, David, your book, the Heller-Schmidt-Kelsen book, somewhat along the same lines. So there could be such a reading of it. I don't know what you'll do. Okay, so I think that's actually, so there's much less tension that initially was. We may have suspected there is. Another thing I wanted to bring to the table was that indeed Eyal presented us with this comprehensive theory of sovereignty and trusteeship, but not only did people chose either sovereignty or trusteeship, but they also shied away from both and kind of presented many other alternative concepts. So we had usus fructus, we had genes, corporatism and pluralism, we had humanitarian intervention, democracy, solidarity, cosmopolis, mandate, fiduciary. I made this list of all the alternative. And I'm asking, what does that mean? Are these synonyms? Is that a polite way of saying actually we have problems with the concept, so we're going for a different one? Are the ways in which people actually want to voice their own terminology and in that way stress other elements in that particular theory that they wish to put to the table? So I was curious about that kind of trend that we saw, that it wasn't really always a clear, direct engagement with the concept itself, but kind of providing us with an alternative language. And so perhaps I should put that on the table. And the last thing I wanted to kind of flesh out is the question of agency. So that's my fourth and last thing. And so the question of agency, I think, was very strongly conveyed in different papers. Who are actually the beneficiary? Who decides? What are the conditions of representation? And even the question of the lack of voice in our own room. So the question of voice, when do we have too much voice? When does voice become vote? When is it the inner groups that are the ones that we should provide a voice for, vote for, veto for? Is it outsiders only? What is the relationship between outsiders and insiders? So I think the question of agency was very, very central to the discussion, trusteeship from whom, in the last panel. So I think we should actually put that as well as one of the central themes and puzzles we'll have to grapple with as we move along. So I'd like to open up for if someone wants to have some ideas, comments, conclusions, questions, or not. So please. Everyone is tired.
Because people are tired, yeah?
Yeah, tired. Okay, so yes.
I want to
Yeah,
say something.
okay.
I want to. No, I want to. Well, yeah, I should have it on record. I just wanted to really commend Eyal and Doreen for this really very interesting workshop, and also, especially Eyal, I think for bringing people that critique him, and which is important. I mean, nobody, but slowly. And I think it's very important, and it shows a true ability to engage in dialogue. I mean, although some, I could imagine, some voices are missing, but I think that critical voices were here. So I think I make the differentiation.